Welcome to the Secrets of College Planning. I'm your host, Anthony Uva, and today we're going to get into inclusion at the college level. My guest today is Amy Wilson. She is the Managing Director for the NCAA's Office of Inclusion. And welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anthony. It's great to be here today.
Yeah, so Amy, usually I start my guests where they went to college. So where'd you go to school?
So I did my undergraduate degree at Illinois College, a Division III small liberal arts school in Illinois, and then a master's degree at the University of Illinois and a PhD at the University of Iowa. So I have kind of stayed in the Midwest for both degrees and work.
Wow. So just to get into how you got from college to where you are today, just give us a path of what you took.
Sure. Well, my bachelor's and master's degrees were both in English. And I thought about law school, and then I decided, no, I want to teach. And so I was teaching at the college level in an English department, and great ideas of the Western world, literature classes, writing classes. And someone from the athletic department came over and knocked on my door and said, hey, you were a college athlete. Why don't you come over and help out with athletics a little bit? And so a year later, I was the head coach of the women's basketball team and the softball team. So I'm not quite sure how that happened, but clearly I had a passion for athletics that led me over that way as well. So I was running from the English department over to the athletic complex back and forth. And so as I got more involved in athletics, I realized that I had a real passion for just opportunity in athletics and helping people to gain those opportunities, and particularly in the area of gender equity. And so I left my job at a college to go work on my PhD, and very intentionally went to the University of Iowa to study with a woman named Dr. Christine Grant, who had been the longtime women's athletics director at Iowa, and also taught in a very strong academic department with some leading sports sociologists and historians and things. And I realized that if she was a leading expert on Title IX and gender equity, that's where I could go to get the knowledge I needed to hopefully make a difference. And so I did go and get that degree and had a wonderful experience there, came back to teach and became a tenured professor at a college. But when the NCAA job came open, I realized that there would be no better platform from which to work on diversity, equity, and inclusion than that opportunity. So 5 years ago, I left my tenured faculty position and made the journey to another Midwest state, Indiana, from Illinois, to take the position in the Office of Inclusion. So higher ed, my entire career, had just moved from campus to the NCAA.
So you started as the managing director there?
I started as a director, and I oversaw the key areas. We have core areas on which we focus, and I was the lead on women and LGBTQ. And then around 2 years ago, I was promoted to managing director, where I oversee the full office. And so I'm excited to have that opportunity and the platform from which to do this work.
So now go into the Office of Inclusion. What
Sure.
does it actually do?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. A lot of people know that we run championships and that we enforce rules and all sorts of good stuff like that, but don't always know that we have so many services like inclusion and leadership development and, the Sports Science Institute that works so hard on student well-being and safety. But the Office of Inclusion is a team of 6 professionals who work on providing education and resources for our membership that focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our signature event every year is our annual inclusion forum that happens in the spring, and we try to position that as the premier event for diversity and inclusion in intercollegiate athletics. And so we invite all sorts of experts to come in and speak, and our membership, and particularly our student athletes, are part of that. We also, as you all know, the NCAA is driven by our membership. So we have 4 diversity, equity, and inclusion committees that are made up of student athletes, coaches, administrators, presidents and chancellors, faculty athletic reps, student affairs professionals, you name it. Those positions on college campuses are the ones that drive our work. And so the team and I are very proud to facilitate the work of those committees so that the work we do on our main initiatives are driven by our membership. So that's a key function that we have, is to ensure that those who vote on the decisions the NCAA makes, that we're helping them to reach their goals. So those are some of our main responsibilities. And I'll note too that we focus on 5 core areas. I should include that: disability, international, LGBTQ, race and ethnicity, and women are our 5 core areas. Not all that we do, but we certainly are very intentional about working in those 5 areas.
So the pandemic happened this year. What challenges has the Office of Inclusion gone through? What are some of the things that you'll be initiating as time goes on this year as well as next year?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and you know, I certainly hope all those listening today are safe and as well as possible. You know, it's really the unthinkable that happened, right? And we're continuing to live through that. It did turn our world upside down a bit when everything started to really happen in March. We realized pretty quickly that our in-person inclusion forum that was set to break attendance records was no longer going to happen. So we adjusted the 2-day inclusion forum in April that was going to take place in Denver, Colorado, and create a summer series of webinars. And I will note that after George Floyd was murdered in that 3rd week of May, that the focus of all that we did in our summer series, no matter what core area we were working on, turned, you know, very intently to race and ethnicity. And so we did a series of webinars all summer, and we have our last one, a focus on women, to happen in the next 3 weeks or so. But we really tried to do all that we could to provide programming and education to the membership through webinars. I'll also say that our colleagues in research did a very good survey on COVID-19 and how it's impacting student athletes. So, and those results are available on our NCAA.org website. We certainly were looking at those results and how student athletes with various identities were being desperately impacted, right, by COVID in terms of food insecurity or, you know, lack of a place to go for home, or, you know, it posed all sorts of challenges for student athletes. And so in all that we do, we're always trying to prioritize the student athlete voice and to think about student athlete needs. So it did really shift our attention, and I'm proud of the team for being flexible and nimble to sort of change the way we were delivering. And of course, we're always looking for feedback from the membership on what they need.
So now, what type of initiatives are you doing for the end of this year as well as next year?
Yeah, so we've been in, again, I noted the webinar series. So part of our education is working on that. I also want to note, and this is great for your listeners, that we are hosting from October 27th to 29th, our 3rd annual social media campaign, #NCAA Inclusion. My colleague, Naya Blair-Hackworth, who leads our efforts on race and ethnicity, is working with our diversity inclusion committees, particularly the Minority Opportunities and Interest Committee that we lead, to facilitate that. And it will be 3 days of social media talking about everything diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have trended in the top 10 on Twitter nationally in past years when we've done this. So we're really excited about that particular initiative. Another key item that we're working on is that our membership voted last January at our NCAA convention. When I say our membership, I mean divisions 1, 2, and 3, that every athletics department and every conference will have something called the Athletics Diversity and Inclusion Designee. And then, of course, we love acronyms, right? So we're calling it the ADID, Athletics Diversity Inclusion Designee. So by August 1 of this year, we asked all our schools and conferences to turn in the name of the person who would do that for them. And that person will be a key point on communication from the NCAA to the rest of the athletics department on the campus about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then we're also very much hoping that that position, that designation continues to grow and evolve as we hope diversity, equity, and inclusion become even more of a priority. So one of our major initiatives in our office is develop educational resources and to partner with other groups that are working on this across the country to empower that new designee. So those are some examples of the way that we're working with the membership. One other one that I'll note is that in August, we recently just held a summit on diverse student athletes and mental health and well-being. And so out of that summit, we are working on a number of initiatives to support student athlete mental health. And that is a partnership in a way that we're supporting our Sports Science Institute that leads on mental health for the NCAA. So those are some key initiatives that we're working on that are very much driven by the membership and that we're partnering with other key groups across the country.
So now you talked about social media campaign.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly have you been doing in the social media campaign?
Yeah, so So our one of our diversity, equity, inclusion committees and works on the content for that. So we have a theme for every day, and then we invite. Some of your listeners may know, but some may not know that every athletics department across the country, all 1,100 of them, plus conferences, have student athlete advisory committees, and then those committees at each campus then form one at the conference level, and then we have national SAC, where representatives from conference come to the national level. That structure is intentional so that we always have the student athlete voice prioritized. So I tell that background to say that student athletes are very much driving the social media campaign. And so and very soon we'll have a platform on our website, ncaa.org, search inclusion, and it will pop up. You'll find it there, where each day has a particular theme. And then we invite student athletes, everyone across the membership, to engage in that campaign. And it's a way to raise awareness. It's also a way to point to what are action items, because it's one thing to talk about this, but then what are the transformational or meaningful actions that are happening or that can happen from this type of engagement. And we find regularly that our student athletes are our best leaders in this space. They are the ones that get things done. And let me give an example. Just yesterday, our Division I Council, made up of leaders across the membership, voted to support and to put into legislation the Division I Student Athlete Advisory Council's recommendation that the election day in November every year be a day where there are no athletic activities, where the focus is on student athletes having the space and the time in their day around their academic focus to vote, to express their voices. And so that's an example of a student athlete-led initiative that is now legislated, and that came from our student athletes. And so I'm just really proud of, and that's one example of some others. There are also all divisions working on a unity pledge right now, so that all 3 divisions, student athletes, will come forth to say, this is what we believe in, and this is how we want to move forward in terms of racial and social justice. So again, really proud of our student athletes.
Now, you talked about the 5 cores that the Inclusion Office handles. Can you go into each one and elaborate a little on each part of it?
Yeah, sure. You know, until about 8 to 10 years ago, the way, and I've been here for 5, so I'm telling history before I arrived, but the NCAA has had for 20, 25 years a focus on women and race and ethnicity. There was work being done in those areas, but there was a recognition around a decade ago that, you know, diversity, that's important, but diversity is more than that. So we've expanded our office to have the 3 additional areas of LGBTQ, disability, and international. And so what I would say about our directors who are leading on disability and international, the phases that we're in there are getting a lot of feedback from the membership and our administrators and coaches who work directly with student athletes, international student athletes, and then also who are guiding student athletes with disabilities, whether those be education impacting disabilities, whether those be physical disability, whatever those might be. And we are gathering information from our membership and looking towards hosting think tanks where we can determine what resources are needed and what partnerships can we develop. So we're in a listening, moving to action phase there. In terms of LGBTQ engagement, I'll mention 2 things. We have an initiative called Common Ground that brings together persons from across our membership, and also experts in LGBTQ, as well as persons who come from various faith backgrounds, to talk about how we can look at the identities of faith, religion, and LGBTQ on our campuses, and how we can come together to find common ground in order to create environments that are inclusive, where our student athletes can reach their potential and feel safe. And so that's hard work. That's very hard work. And so we are looking to, for the 6th year, to hold a meeting where we're bringing the membership together. It will be virtual, and we're rethinking that, but that's one of our major LGBTQ initiatives, Common Ground. And then in just a few weeks, we are hosting a summit on gender identity and student athlete participation. So we are looking at our policy on transgender student athlete participation that we've had for 10 years, and thinking about how are we serving all of our student athletes in that particular space, our student athletes of all genders, and bringing in experts, persons from the membership. So that will be in a couple of weeks. In terms of race and ethnicity, That is our priority right now. We've been providing webinars, and we are also working on a number of resources for our website on how to have difficult conversations about race. That is a top priority, and we're bringing that into all that we're doing. And finally, in our area of women, we are going to hold our Woman of the Year event in October that we annually hold, and that's identifying extraordinary women, female student athletes across the membership that excel in academics, athletics, and leadership and service. And if you want a hard job, try taking nearly 200 nominees from the conferences and figuring out a top 30, a top 9, and a winner. If you ever want to feel like you haven't accomplished much in your life, it's an enterprise to take on. So in terms of women, we will be holding that on November 1st. And then we are also getting ready to host a webinar on gender equity in Title IX as it applies to athletics, and also as it applies to sexual violence in terms of the new regulations that have come out from the Department of Ed. So I could go on and on about each core area, but I just wanted to give you a few examples of work that we're doing in each of those.
So now tell me, if a student goes to a college and let's say is part of the LGBTQ community, or is a woman, or is any of the cores that are going on,
right?
Do they come to you as the inclusion office and say, hey, you know, I want to go out for this particular sport. What are my rights? What do I do?
You know, they do. We sometimes get calls from parents. We get calls from student athletes, you know, to ask about that. Often, if they're asking about particular rules or policies, the great thing, you know, I'm in the national office today, and some of my colleagues are, but you know, I have 500 plus colleagues who have specialty in all sorts of areas about, you know, waivers or participation rules. So we're always eligibility center. So we rely on our colleagues with expertise, but yes, we certainly do provide support for those areas. And in terms of asking what can expectations be about an inclusive environment, every institution across the country has the autonomy to create their own policies. We certainly try to provide guidance and help. And one of the challenges of doing diversity, equity, inclusion work for 1,100 institutions is that they are all at different places when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion. So our job is to meet them where they are and provide the support that they need. And we certainly do communicate with student athletes and parents. We have a general email line to our inclusion office that's checked every day. And so we're working hard to ensure that that we address those concerns as they occur.
And they find you on the ncaa.org website and just go to
They can. Absolutely. So if you go to ncaa.org, it's /inclusion, or if you're on ncaa.org, up in the upper box where it's searched, if you type in inclusion, you will come to our inclusion website, and you will see, you can click on our 5 core areas. We've done some work to our website, so it's improved. We're still working to make it better, but hopefully fairly easy to navigate. You can find what you need. Certainly contact information is there, so if you can't find it, let us know, and we'll be glad to help out. Or get you to our colleagues who will know the answer. So, yes.
Are there videos on there as well?
Yeah, we have been recording our webinars, our summer series. And so when you go, you will find that you can, you know, click on those and watch those. So yes, there is some video material that's available now for each of our 5 core areas.
So now, one of the big things this year is the image, name, and likeness.
Yes.
What do you see as the impact towards the Title IX?
Yeah, you know, it's a little bit early to tell on that. I think we'll know more when we see the proposals that each of the divisions will actually vote on in January. I will say that I mentioned to you that we have 4 membership committees working on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So they're certainly paying attention to that and to their colleagues who are working on the legislation that will occur there. One of the things I want to note that our Board of Governors did, and those are the Board of Governors at the NCAA are the presidents and chancellors from all 3 divisions that make association-wide policy. So it was our Board of Governors that said, Division 1, 2, and 3, please work on legislation for NIL that will work for each of your divisions. And when they did that, the Board of Governors said, we have a principle of equity here, right? We have to remember gender equity. So that's been a foundational principle as they've been moving forward. And our office has supported those discussions when they've had questions about that. We don't, at the NCAA, enforce Title IX. We do try to support our member schools by providing educational materials. Of course, it's the Department of Ed that does that. So, the hope is that whatever legislation comes through, we're providing valuable opportunity for student athletes. And at the same time, we're doing that in a way that is equitable and that we're not seeing harm to women's sports. I will note that that's something to pay attention to. Something else our committees are noticing is that there's no doubt that COVID-19 has wreaked havoc on people's health and well-being, but it has also created extraordinary financial challenges, and that's true in the world of athletics as well. A number of our departments are, furloughs, layoffs, and even cutting sports, and so that's also a concern as the financial challenges continue. What does that look like? And that is a concern for all student athletes, not a particular group, but for all who may experience loss of opportunity due to those challenges. So I would say both in terms of name, image, and likeness and the financial impacts of COVID are ones that we're watching and hoping we can come out the other side of that with our participation opportunities intact.
And do you see this continuing throughout next year as well, or at sooner or later, hopefully this all ends?
Yeah, I think a vaccine will help greatly. I think, we'll know we're starting to get to the other side. I do think there will be long-term ramifications from this, and I think it's not this year. I think it will be into the next few years as we try to catch up. Unfortunately, I think that will be the case, and a lot of it will depend on what can happen in the spring moving forward. Will we be able to hold the full slate of championships? And we're hopefully will. I know my colleagues in championships are working on all sorts of scenarios, and the way that we can do that in the safest way possible. We have a team of experts from across the country. We just expanded it to bring in more expertise working on COVID-19 and guidelines to keep student athletes safe. So I think we're doing all that we can to see what we can provide for student athletes in the spring, and I think that will tell a lot about what's going to happen forward financially. But I think unfortunately it's going to take a while to recover from this. So we're all going to have to get creative and stay at the task of figuring out how we do that. It's hard. It really is.
Now, what are some of the initiatives that you're working on with the disabilities and international students?
Yeah, so I mentioned briefly earlier in our conversation that those are two newer areas that we're doing. I will say that in July, as part of our summer series, we held 2 webinars on international student athletes. One of them featured the voices of international student athletes, and then the other, a variety of experts from attorneys to administrators on campuses who support student athletes, international student athletes, and those are available on our website. So we're really in the mode of how do we engage with the membership and share valuable information to them. We also are looking to hold a think tank that will help us shape our way forward in that space and bringing in the voices of international student athletes and those who serve them every day. And in the disability space, we've really been focusing on partnering with the Sports Science Institute on mental health. The Sports Science Institute leads on mental health, but we also support that through our area of disability. And we held 2 webinars in August that focused on mental health. And those are also available on our website. So again, trying to provide education and important dialogue that empowers and helps those who are, serving our student athletes. Those are 2 key things that we have done. We'll continue in that space. Certainly for our inclusion forum planning, those 2 core areas will be central. And again, working to create some strong strategic plans that are guided by our membership needs in those areas.
Do you find any challenges from those particular students with disabilities and international students right now?
Yeah, I think that I'll note one challenge has been the displacement from campus. So especially last spring, I know some campuses are back in session, some are not, but when COVID really hit and we saw schools have to shut their doors and students, so it's, well, where do you go? Your plan was to, be on that campus that's home for you in terms of where you're at, and your support systems are there, whether it be your counselor, mental health, academic. So we did see a number of challenges for students, and that came through in our COVID-19 survey, that they were lacking the resources when they had to leave campus that they had that they had counted on, and then how do you find those when you're no longer in that space? And so there was a lot of scrambling there, and I think that continues to some degree with campuses being in various degrees of in person right now. So certainly that we've noted that, and I think also for international student athletes, it's your status and changing policies and the ways our federal government is allowing travel or not allowing travel and access to education. And as those decisions are made, undeniably those impact our international student athletes. So we're trying to do whatever we can to make sure they're empowered with the education that they have, and that our athletic departments are places where those students, as much as we can, are providing support along with the other resource groups on campus.
So we're coming to the end of our show, and I usually ask my guests, what advice do you want to give to the students out there? What advice would you like to give them?
Yeah, well, if you're speaking about it in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, which is what I would do, I would just say to them that there's no other point, I think, in history, or in my lifetime, where their voices are being listened to or matter more than now. So I encourage them to use it. I encourage them to vote, to express themselves. Our leadership development department just held a 4-part series on student voice and student activism that was recorded. That's available on our website. Encourage them to go there. We're working on resources to support student athlete voice and activism. So I encourage them to get involved on their campus, both in their athletics department, on their wider campus, in those discussions and in the groups and committees that are working on that. Their voice matters, and we want to hear it. And and I hope that they'll continue to lead and guide important actions that are going to take place. I think at no other time have they been positioned to have a great opportunity to make that change. And I'm excited about this generation of student athletes and the compassion and care from which they are focused on and working on DE&I issues. It's inspiring to me every day. It's something that in these troubled times keeps me at the table and working hard for them.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Anthony, thank you, and thanks for all the good work you're doing in higher education. Great to be here with you today.
So you've been watching The Secrets of College Planning. I'm your host, Anthony Uva. Until next time.